Beijing is expected to approve drastic changes to Hong Kong's electoral system on Thursday. The city's leader, Carrie Lam, says that the reforms are urgent, so there won't be any public consultation, especially since the decision has already been decreed by Beijing. Last year's Legislative Council polls were delayed because of the coronavirus, and they could now be pushed back further, given the sweeping changes. Critics fear that the overhaul will shut out opposition figures.
It would be very wrong to perceive what the central authorities are now doing as a retrogression. It is trying to remedy the deficiencies in the electoral system, put it back into its proper context of one country, two systems, ensuring that we are able to safeguard national security, development interests, and the long-term stability and prosperity in Hong Kong, so that it could then move forward.
Roland Lim joins us live now. Roland, why is Beijing in a rush to pass these reforms for Hong Kong?
Right, yes. Like the national security law, the electoral reform package won't have extensive public consultation in Hong Kong. And Beijing has said that there is urgency, making the point that there are loopholes and deficiencies in the current electoral system, and therefore affecting the stability and prosperity of the city. And because Hong Kong's legislature doesn't have the ability to solve these systemic problems. That's why the central government is taking charge from that point of view. We've already heard from Wang Chen, who is the vice chair of the National People's Congress. He, at the opening of Parliament last week, said that there were loopholes and deficiencies had created an avenue for anti-China forces to threaten China's sovereignty as well as security. And that's the urgency that Beijing is speaking of. Mrs. Carrie Lam, as you heard earlier on there, speaking to reporters, said that the electoral reform package, though it will be major, is not to exclude opposition voices in the legislature or any part of the government, but it's actually designed to ensure that whoever is helping to administrate Hong Kong is a patriot. And a patriot, as defined by Beijing, is he or she who loves his country and loves Hong Kong and wants to defend national sovereignty as well as foreign interference against the country. So Beijing is in a rush also because there are several major elections coming up in the next 12 to 16 months. You've already heard that the Legislative Council elections have been postponed by a year to this September. Then we have the election committee polls, the 1,200 election members that actually select the next chief executive. And the next chief executive election is also taking place in the second quarter of 2022. So these major elections are coming up, and Beijing wants to make sure that the proper framework is in place before all these elections take place.
Well, in the face of these local elections possibly being postponed again, Roland, what's been the reaction to that?
Well, of course, many people feel that it's a big blow, really, to free and fair elections. But more urgent or more, I guess, controversial, really, is the makeup of this electoral reform package that we've yet to get the details confirmed. But we've already heard from the former opposition leader, Emily Lau of the Democratic Party, previously saying that the reform package basically erases all the progress that has been made for democratic reforms in the city these past 10 years. And that many people, she says, also feels that this is a result of a regression, really, in political development in Hong Kong. Now, there are others who also feel that this will eventually make it nearly impossible for any candidate advocating democratic reforms in the city to be elected because of the high thresholds that Beijing will put into place because of these reforms. But whether the disenfranchised will take to the streets again, well, that is a very big question, because we've already seen scores of political leaders and we've seen scores of political activists and opponents that have been jailed, now remanded in custody, facing very serious charges under the national security law that could result in life in prison. So it remains to be seen whether these people can organize themselves and whether they will be risking jail time if they actually turn up on the streets to vote en masse. Remember, since the national security law was passed in June last year, mass protests have actually been scaled down here in Hong Kong. The last one we saw was when scores of pro-democracy activists were actually brought to jail to answer charges under the national security law. So if these people do want to go to the streets, they are risking jail time, because currently right now, under safe distancing measures as well, because of the coronavirus, no more than 4 people can gather in public at any one time.
Roland, thank you very much for that. Roland Lim there with the latest in developments from Hong Kong.